Hello. Today I'm going to talk about a hand I played last week at the Texas Card House here in Austin. It's in a 1-2 no limit hold'em game, and it was in a bomb pot, double board PLO bomb pot, which we play every round and every dealer change. 8 players put in $5 each for a total of 40 in the pot, and I was in the big blind. I was dealt ace of diamonds, queen of clubs, 6 of spades, 10 of diamonds. First board came jack of hearts, 3 of diamonds, 10 of spades. Second board came 9 of diamonds, 4 of clubs, 7 of diamonds. The small blind checks, and I'm in the big blind, and I have 815 in my stack. I decide to check also, and then it gets checked around to the button, who's a serious player, and his stack was 760. He bets $30, and the small blind folds, and I decide to call. And also under the gun one, who's a recreational player with a stack of 1,050, calls also. Everyone else folds, so it goes 3 ways to the turn. The turn comes the king of clubs on the top board and the deuce of spades on the bottom board. And even though I just turned the nuts, and I also have the nut flush draw on the bottom board, I decided to check because number one, I'm out of position, and number two, we're all deep. Now the recreational player in under the gun one leads exactly half pot, 65 into 130, and the button calls, and I also call. River comes the 9 of hearts on top and the jack of diamonds on the bottom, giving me the nut straight on top and the nut lock on the bottom. Didn't really know how much to bet here, but I did figure out that it was probably really bad to check. So I went ahead and potted it, but both players folded. And I think I made a mistake here, and as we'll see, I probably did. Because of the way the betting went, it seems unlikely that the button had turned Broadway on top also. But under the gun one, who in my experience plays a lot of hands and has a pretty wide range, reacted to the turn card on top. So he certainly could have Broadway also, but he also could be betting with just the king high straight. So given the way everything went down by the turn, I think the most likely hands the button has is a set, maybe top set on the top or the bottom, and a straight draw or a flush draw on the bottom also. I already know that under the gun one probably has either the nuts, Broadway on top, or the king high straight on top. But he's going to have a smaller flush on the bottom too, some percentage of the time. So I think it's reasonable to assume that either the button or under the gun one will have a smaller flush, I don't know, maybe 25 to 33% of the time, maybe even as much as 40% of the time. One other thing here is if under the gun one led the turn with the king high straight, the 9 coming on the river on top makes his hand much more vulnerable to a chop now. And since I pot the river when the diamond comes on the bottom board, both players have to be somewhat afraid that I have nut-nut. This brings up an important point. Now, when Hero rivers the nut flush or another lock nut hand, but has nothing on the other board, he should always pot it, because someone with a hand that's vulnerable to getting quartered might just end up folding, and then Hero ends up with the whole pot. Now, this means that the GTO play is probably to pot the river with nut nut, like I had in this hand, because it creates balance when Hero is only has the nut flush on one board and nothing on the other, and pots it also. As we've seen, if I pot the river here, the only time I'm going to end up getting called is if under the gun one has the nuts on top also. But he might get scared or confused and fold because he's afraid of getting quartered. So I don't think I'm going to get many calls here if I pot this river. But it's important to remember that I think the worst thing I can do here is check. So what if I only bet half the pot on the river? Because I want the nuts on top to call me 100% of the time, and also the king high straight and smaller flushes to call me as much as possible. So if I pot the river here, it's anybody's guess how often under the gun one will call me. But let's just say it's 30% of the time. To make it easy, let's just say there was $400 in the pot. Over a 10-hand sample, we see that I end up profiting $430 per hand. I think the question of whether to pot it or to bet a smaller amount, like half pot, really depends on what kind of players my opponents are. Versus really good or really bad players, I think the best river sizing is to pot it. Because against really good players, I'll be balanced when I pot it and only have the nuts on one board but nothing on the other. And versus really bad players, they're much more likely to get confused, misread the situation, make a mistake, or call any amount based on how good their hand looks to them. Versus everyone else, I think betting half pot or just a little bit more is better. because they're much more likely to pay off losers versus a discounted price. And I don't think they're really factoring in how balanced my sizing is. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. And until next time, good luck at the game.